In today's edition of Sport SA Daily Diary, we'll be chatting to Springbok and World Cup winning captain John Smit. Good morning, John. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Adam. I'm good. We just over just over 2 weeks in lockdown, so a couple of weeks left, but all good.
And you, one of those, I suppose not lucky few, but kind of lucky few that get to go out every day.
We're one of our companies is a security company, and the other is a cleaning company, and the security is pretty much flat out, and cleaning is at about sort of just under half. So, we've got to distribute sanitizer and all sorts of cleaning products, as well as keep sites secure and guards in place. And so, I guess it's one of those services that the country's in desperate need of, and it makes me get into the office. Oh, yeah, I got a beagle biting the earphones. So.
One of the many family members you've got at home with you. How are the kids handling it?
Yeah. I think my two eldest are okay. I mean, my eldest is 13. She's first year high school, so she's got quite a bit of work to do. My son starts tomorrow with his work, and then my 7-year-old is bored out of his skull. So I feel mostly for her, because she's sort of, the rest we can all sort of jump on a trainer and a treadmill and get going. But that's probably why the beagle was bought 2 days before lockdown, which is why they're playing. So I'm gonna have to calm them down. Hey! Let me see the voice of discipline, Adam.
Excellent.
So the beagle puppy was sort of more to keep her sort of entertained, but it's hard for the youngsters, because they don't have a curriculum or schoolwork to follow, and they do reading once a day, and that's about it.
Yeah. And how have you been keeping yourself busy, John? Because I mean, since you left rugby, you've been on a mountain bike. You've done 4 Absa Cape Epics now. Huh? You were going for your 5th, so it's not as if you're not an inactive person.
Yeah. Look, I think sort of the mountain biking, I think, is just one way of I think it's a great transitioning tool from what was, I guess, a fairy tale job of playing rugby for a living to the real world. And I think the mountain bike probably facilitates a lot of those, I guess, those habits, getting up, training, this is of discipline. And then also there's camaraderie as well. The mountain bike is a bit more social than the roadies. The roadies are sort of like to sit in front in the wheel and not talk too much. And so the mountain biking was just an easy fit for me. And I think it's sort of one that's been quite popular amongst the rugby players. But I haven't been in rugby. Well, I suppose I sit administratively with SA Rugby and my players and SA Rugby Legends, but I haven't been working in rugby for almost 5 years now. So no, 4 years. So yes, and Epics, I think there are other beautiful events to do, but Epic, I suppose, is exactly that. It's Epic, and this would have been the 6th. So we arrived in Cape Town. In fact, this year's Epic was cancelled as I checked my bag through at Lanseria Airport on the Friday night. Yeah, so we arrived in Cape Town. We did the prologue on the Saturday morning and came back on Sunday.
Oh, probably the easiest Epic you've done.
Yeah. I sent all my stuff down in my car, and so I actually left early Sunday morning, and on Sunday I spent 14 and a half hours on the road from Cape Town to Pretoria. So probably the hardest prologue I've ever done, but the easiest Epic. So we're not quite at number 6 yet, so we'll have to see how we go again next year.
And John, you mentioned you haven't been in rugby for 4 years. That's a long time since your start in Rustenburg at Fields College. I must say, I never knew that about you. I thought you were a Durban boy from the start.
No, in fact, it was called Fields Primary at the time. It's turned into Fields College now because they've added a high school. But I got to Fields at the end of standard 3, which I think was 89, if I'm not mistaken, or 88. I can't remember. My dad was an engineer on the mine, so we were sent to a mine called Semanco. He worked at Semanco in a little town called Moinoi. I'm pretty sure you haven't heard of Moinoi.
No, I haven't.
So Moino is about 40 k's from Rustenburg, and so my mom and I, she taught at Selly Park, and I went to school at Fields, and we drove in every day, and that was it was a pretty cool chapter, short chapter for me, because once we moved to Rustenburg, my dad then sent me to Pretoria Boys High, so I boarded in Pretoria, and 5 years later, I matriculated at Pretoria Boys, and then I was one of the first batch of players offered professional contracts, because the game went professional in 95 after the World Cup victory for the Springboks. And then, as you well know, all the sort of commercial deals started. And in 96, it was the first time provinces were allowed to sort of contract players. And so I went from being enrolled at Tux to do physio to studying BCom accounting at Pietermaritzburg University, which didn't last more than 7 months. So I always joke, people always ask, before I did my postgrad at UCT 2 years ago, I used to say I've got a BCom rugby from Pietermaritzburg University, because that's about as long as I lasted at Maritzburg. It was 7 months.
Sure. And was it always the Sharks? Were there other teams that were in for you, or what made you go there?
So, we were very few of us supported the Sharks in high school. Dave Tubb, one of my best mates, he and I were sort of the Lone Rangers, and we used to take a lot of flack. But it was a good time to be a Shark supporter. And the reason I was a Shark supporter was because my butt was at Natal Tech at the time, and he was a Shark supporter. And as you well know, that sort of indoctrination sort of worked quite well, and I was supporting the Sharks before I even got to Pretoria Boys High. So you joke, you say, were there any other people interested? It wasn't an easy decision to take up a contract in Durban. It was such a big change, and my life probably I felt it would have been smoother if I'd stayed in Pretoria. So my dad went to who's that ginger boykie? I think Wim Vaney, the manager of the Bulls. And he just said, "Look, my son's been offered this contract, but he's enrolled at Tux. Is there a chance that he should stay, or is there anything for him like that here?" And Wim Vaney kindly said to him very politely, "We wish John all the very best in Natal." And
nice.
Look, I think it was the best thing that could ever have happened. In fact, from the time that my dad spoke to the Bulls, it was less than 9 months later, I was playing my first class game for Natal in a Currie Cup game. So I don't think that ever would have happened in Pretoria, but in Durban, moving to Durban, everything was fast tracked massively for me.
So how did Pretoria Boys cope with having a head boy that was a Sharks fan? That must have been quite a rude awakening for them, and the first team player for 3 years.
My boss at the time, Mr. Bull Schroeder, he was the headmaster, and obviously a massive rugby fan. So there was not much I could do wrong at Boys High, considering I was playing first team from Form 3. So, he didn't love the fact that I was a Sharks supporter. He was a Western Province supporter, so he was probably equally unpopular in Pretoria. But so I managed to get away with a bit more than most, purely because I was half decent at rugby at high school.
And were you always a hooker?
No, in fact, I started at prop at the tender age of 11, which is quite late for a SA boykie, and played prop all the way until I was 19. 22 actually. I played tight head throughout my high school career. I was chosen as a loose head for SA under 19 in my first year out of school, and I also played a bit of flank for Maritzburg varsity under 21s. They were very desperate, and then only when I was 22 did Jake White actually say that I should give hooker a go. He believed that there was a gap there after sort of the James Dalton era, and that if I could get the ball thrown in properly, I'd have a half decent future up there.
And John, you certainly made that your own. Between 2004 and 2007, you made 46 consecutive appearances for the Springboks. I think a record that still stands, if I'm not correct.
Yeah, it's not. It is. It's crazy to think that I played 46 in a row. But I'm not sure that. I suppose back then it probably wasn't as vicious as it is today. It feels like when I watch these games now, it's just a bit more physical, faster. Yeah, it'd be tough to play 46 test matches in a row, I think. And the other fortunate thing was that I had a coach that did back me throughout that. So it's a fortunate combination to have.
Yeah. And John, have you always had such strong leadership qualities? I mean, you look at some of the captains that have been in the past, and the standouts are Pino, yourself, and now Khaleesi, I suppose. But there was something really special about you. I mean, you may have been having a not so good game, but you still managed to lift the team to victory through sheer will and through your strength as captain. Has that been a strength for you since young, or where did that come from?
It's always tricky to discuss your own leadership abilities. And I always say when people ask about sort of how were you as a captain, it's probably the better question to ask those that you captained. But what I can say is that it did follow me around a bit. When I got to high school, I was born April, so I was born in the first 6 months. So the way age groups worked, I was actually playing so in Form 1, I was playing with the Form 2s. Because I was born early in the year. That's sort of just how it worked. So I never really captained through the age groups, and only actually for the first time captained a team for the first time when I was in matric, which was the first team rugby team. And I guess since then I captained some under 20 teams, under 21 teams, Natal, the Sharks, and I guess from there it sort of followed me, the leadership thing, and I'd like to think that it was something that developed over the years. It certainly wasn't something that I was brilliant at in the beginning, and I think that's like with anything. I was fortunate to be captained by such iconic captains over the times. If I think of names, I was captained by Joost, Mark Andrews, Bobby Skinstead, Corné Krige, Gary Teichmann, Wayne Farvey, and the names, the list go on, Andre Vos. And I learned so much from all these amazing captains. So I guess I was fortunate to add a little bit here and there as I went along. And I guess it helped in times when I wasn't, featuring and playing well in a game. I did focus on making sure that the team was always in a good space, and that the climate, which I always could have called it, climate of a team, how they're feeling and how they're performing and what's going on. And I quite liked being in control and having an influence over that climate.
Yeah, I mean, your success rate just shows that you've won 46 of your 64 matches as captain, 72%, and you've actually won more games as captain than any other player has played as captain. I mean, that really just speaks for itself.
These stats are cool and they're nice to hear. At the end of the day, every single stat in rugby is dependent on 14 other guys for every single minute that you've ever played. Well, I say that probably 15 with the referee included. So, I always find it interesting for rugby players claiming sort of stats and that kind of thing, because there's not one rugby person in the world that can claim any kind of stat without at least giving credits to the people that he played with over an entire career.
Very true. John, you've had some amazing results in rugby. The win of the Tri-Nations in 2009, the win against the British Lions in 2009, and obviously the World Cup in 2007. Is the World Cup the standout moment in your career?
The World Cup obviously is the pinnacle. I mean, we worked so hard for it. It was a goal that we set 4 years in advance through Jake. It wasn't something that we'd actually ever contemplated, because we were in a pretty dark space before Jake took over. So, 20th of October 2007 is obviously etched in our minds, and it's I guess a memory that we worked hard for, that we will cherish forever. It was probably the hardest game to play pressure-wise, because it all comes down to 80 minutes. It was probably the most disgusting game of rugby that we as a group ever played. We were so conservative and so controlling that, we just didn't allow ourselves to make any kind of mistakes. So the risk element was very, very low. So I think that we were that 2007 World Cup win was something that ignited that group, because we got significantly better in the following couple of years after that.
Yeah. And it was a strange game, that final. I mean, in the earlier group games, we'd smashed England, and now we sort of just got past. Is it because you were so much more conservative, and is it because it was the final that game plan was chosen, or that was the sort of way the game was run?
Look, I think other than this last World Cup, which was the most convincing win I think we've ever seen in World Cup history in a final. Finals do that to you. They sort of, I think, balance things out a bit. But we also must take into consideration that England were a different team to the one that we played in the pool stages. In the pool stages, I'm not sure if you remember, but we had Andy Farrell, who's Owen's dad, playing at fly half, and they had 3 injuries. They had Cat out, they had Wilkinson out, and there was one other. And so it was a different team. And before that, after that game, that English side, which was built around some senior players, actually rallied quite well together. And the players basically took over that campaign from an English rugby point of view and did some incredible things. That resurgence in that World Cup, I mean, had they beaten us, it would have been some story, because they basically said, okay, enough's enough. We're going to take control of this World Cup and we're going to do things our way. And it worked unbelievably well for them. They were far better organized, they were far more motivated, and they were far more effective with Johnny Wilkinson at 10. So they were definitely a better team, and yes, we were cautious of that, and that was represented in how we played.
Yeah, no, for sure. And John, I chatted to Carl Brown the other day and was asking him about the toughest opponent he'd ever faced, which he said was a difficult question. I'm going to send the same question your way. Has there been a player or a team in a specific time that was your toughest opponent?
I think that's in rugby. I think there's three sections. There's a toughest team, toughest player, and then for me there's always the toughest captain, the guy that I used to sort of, I guess, want to beat the most from a strategic and tactical point of view, and all 3 of those lie within the black jersey. You know, the toughest team was always the All Blacks, although our toughest test match probably was the British and Irish Lions in 2009. But the toughest team to beat was always the All Blacks. The toughest opponent was a guy that I played with played against over a decade, was Kevin Milamu, Auckland Blues, All Blacks, a year younger than me, I think. So similar age groups, and so we just twirled with each other for years and years in Super Rugby and in Tri-Nations and World Cups. So he was just a lovely bloke as well, but tough as nails. And captain is easy. I think, in my opinion, probably the greatest player to have played so far, just purely because of not so much that he's got the X factor of a Dan Carter or Johnny Wilkinson, but the fact that he was unbelievably resilient, never had a bad game, captained an All Black team in an era where I think they'll never be as powerful, winning back-to-back World Cups. And so Richie was a great captain to be able to compete against him.
And were you guys mates off the field as well as on it?
I think that we certainly had a much better. Are you talking about Richie and myself? But in general, I think the All Blacks and the Springboks have always gotten along well. You know, there was a time when, in about 2004, where myself and Jean de Villiers all thought that this was going to just getting too serious, and we weren't interacting, and it sort of, we felt that a lot of the old school traditions were falling away, and Skalkberger also felt the same way. And so we got together and we started inviting these teams in the Tri-Nations at the time, Australia and New Zealand, into our change room for a beer after a game. And within no time, that became the norm. And we were then going to their change room. So, for me, I think that's probably one of the best things I've taken out of my time as a Springbok, is that we played against some amazing sides. We won some great games. We lost some tough games. But I've got an amazing set of memories and an amazing group of players that are now friends. I mean, this last World Cup in Japan was like a old boys reunion of all the has-beens that got together to watch the current players. And I tell you what, I felt like I've never worked harder or spent more time at it, because we had all these guys sitting around Tokyo getting together for lunches and dinners and beers, and it was just incredible. And had we not had the right attitude around what other things there are to sport than just winning and losing, we wouldn't have had that experience in Tokyo last year.
Yeah, no, I mean, that must have been absolutely amazing. And John, a bit of a strange question, but when you watch rugby and you watch football, there's such a difference in terms of the respect of the players. And I'm not dissing football at all. I'm a footballer and I'm probably the worst of the lot. Is rugby players do not argue with the referee. They respect the referee's decision. They walk away from the referee's decision. Is that something that is ingrained into rugby players from an early age? I mean, how is it so different to football?
Yeah. Look, it is. And football is an amazing game and the biggest game in the world. But it is fundamentally very, very different to rugby. And I think it's built on different pillars. There's you look at some of these magicians, the Ronaldos, the Messis, and it's magic what these guys can do. But I think rugby is it's built around different pillars. And the story that I tell that relates for me the difference between the two sports is that, you know, my son was never wild about rugby, and he enjoyed hockey, and so, you know, I was for him to do it. But when they started out in junior school, I said to him, he must play rugby, even if it's from a social point of view, because rugby teaches you about a whole bunch of things in life. It teaches you about camaraderie, respect, discipline, hard work, and it also helps you on two factors. It helps you face a few fears, and it also helps you release a lot of frustration that I think that young boys and men have got within inside of them. So, you know, so it's a game, I think, that incorporates and involves a lot more of life's lessons than most sports.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. John, you hung up your boots and then you joined the Sharks in a CEO role. That seemed like quite a tough gig for you.
Look, to be fair, it's been a tough gig for any CEO in rugby in the last 10 years. But you know, I think if I'd known a bit more about what the sort of entailed, it was the only unfortunate thing was how much time it takes away from what you're doing. And I was probably too young at the time, but if you'd asked me honestly, if I'd take those 3 years back, never in a million years. In fact, I would have loved to have stayed on to see it out in terms of the plan that we put together. There was, you know, the intention from the board was for me to come in there as more as a rugby, with the board sort of taking over from a business point of view. But just too many things were unearthed in my first 6 months that sort of stopped that. But I think all of it for the positive. You know, one of the things is that we went through some tough times, but a lot of that change had to be implemented for the Sharks to have a chance of survival. Well, where now look at where all those franchises are right now. It's a tough times with no rugby being played at all and sponsors not being able to get their rights. But that 3 years was incredible. You know, I wouldn't replace it with anything. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed the three years. The thing is, with being a CEO of a rugby team versus a CEO of any other company in this country, is that the truth is you can make 100 million rand profit and come last in Super Rugby, and you'll struggle to have a job the next month. Or you could lose 100 million and win Super Rugby, and you'll be employed forever in this game. And so the sort of that for me was also quite a strange anomaly. But there are some massive challenges, and have been for just under a decade with SA Rugby. So was it tough? Absolutely. But was I alone? It was tough for everyone else. I think everyone else probably just had fewer options than I did, so they've had to hang in. Yeah.
And the Sharks seem to have hit a bit of a resurgence. They've started this season. They were playing some phenomenal rugby. Would you say they're favourites if the season had to continue now?
What I like about the Sharks and what they've done is that it reminds me a bit about Jake. You know, Sean Everett's just he's just a great guy. Players enjoy him. He's earned his stripes like any other, like not many other coaches around currently, which I think is an important thing. And I don't blame coaches for not hanging in there, because it's a difficult country to coach all the way through, from schoolboy to under 19s to under 20s to Currie Cup to Super Rugby. And there's not many guys that have had the mettle to hang in like that. Jake's probably, the last one that's gone from schoolmaster teacher to Springbok. And the trick with Jake is that he took an under 21 side with Eric Sauls and won with these guys. And so that's where the trust of the group was built around him and his way. And he took that through for 4 years into 2007. Sean's had a similar run with, to be fair, being demoted from Super Rugby 19s, then taking on a 19 team and winning unbeaten in the Currie Cup. And then with that core group, a year or 2 years later, having finished top of the log before COVID-19 had sort of struck. So, I think that Sean doesn't get enough credit because he's just not one of those guys that sits in front of the camera and makes these huge statements. He just gets on with it, and he prioritizes the group and the team above anything else. So I honestly hope that he's going to certainly have some difficult games and difficult seasons, but I do hope that they persevere with him.
Yeah. Brilliant, John. It's been awesome to chat to you. Just in closing, we're just over 2 and a bit weeks in. We've got 3 weeks to go. It's getting tough for people out there. You're an inspirational leader of the country. Do you have a message for people out there to just try and get through this period? People are losing jobs and income and all this kind of stuff. People look up to you and they would heed a call that you made. Have you got anything to send out?
Yeah, Adam, it is an incredibly, and it's unprecedented. What we're experiencing now is not something that anyone around has seen. Maybe those that can relate are probably a little bit older, that have been through a World War II and have understood what something like this means. Because I guess, if anything, we can compare it to going through a world war. But there's always some kind of upside, and I think if I just look at myself and I look at the people around me, I've got friends and family and that are struggling and not sure about whether or not they'll have a job to go back to or a business to go back to after this. But in this 5 weeks that we have been asked to stay inside and stay isolated, I don't think I've ever had this many meals sitting around a table with kids and my wife, and I haven't spent this kind of time looking internally and assessing us as a family and myself as an individual. And the other thing is, for those that are uncertain around what's coming, is that we're all in the same boat, that this COVID-19 does not discriminate between any of us. Everyone is in the same boat. So, if you feel like you've failed at your business because you're an SME that's been struck at the wrong time, there's thousands of others who are in the exact same position. And the beauty is, like any other challenge that I've faced within a team, within my family, within a business, and like any other country's faced, is that if we stick together, the human race and us as a country, as South Africans, who are very, very good at surviving, will get through this together again.
Oh. Brilliant, John. Thank you so much. That's a great message. And thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant to chat to you. Good luck with your business, with the security and the cleaning. I'm sure you're going to be kept busy. And your little one, who's, I'm sure, climbing the walls.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Adam. Have a good week.
You too. It's been great to have you. Look out for us tomorrow on Sport SA Daily Diary, where we'll be chatting to long distance and ultra distance runner Jenna Challenor.